I used to think my marriage was solid, stable, if not thrilling. My husband, Omar, is a dedicated man. Hardworking, responsible, always doing what needed to be done to keep our lives comfortable. His job at the logistics firm demanded long hours, and though I missed him, I never complained. I understood. At least, I told myself I did. Our home was quiet most days, just the soft ticking of the clock and the hum of appliances filling the silence. I spent my time managing the household, dabbling in freelance work, and trying to ignore the growing emptiness that clung to the walls like dust I couldn't quite sweep away. Then came Tariq, Omar's younger brother. He had just moved back to town after a messy breakup and needed a place to land. Omar, ever the dutiful brother, offered our guest room without hesitation. "He's family," Omar had said, giving my shoulder a reassuring squeeze. "He won't be any trouble." First, he wasn't. Tariq was charming in a way that felt effortless. He'd always been the more outgoing sibling. Where Omar was stoic and reserved, Tariq was laughter, energy, and quick wit. He filled the silence of the house in ways I hadn't realized I craved. He'd help out with groceries, offer to cook dinner, and linger in the kitchen while I worked, swapping stories that made me laugh more than I had in weeks. Felt harmless, comforting even, a breath of fresh air in a life that had started to feel suffocating. Still, there were moments, small, almost imperceptible shifts in tone or glance. Like the time he told me, "You deserve more attention than Omar gives you." He'd said it with a grin, almost teasing, but his eyes had lingered a second too long. I brushed it off. I had to. It was probably nothing, just Tariq being Tariq. But something inside me stirred. A flicker of attention I didn't want to admit I enjoyed. I told myself it was just the novelty of someone noticing me, seeing me, not just as a wife holding the fort, but as a woman. Then Omar asked me to keep an eye on Tariq while he was away on a week-long business trip. "He's been a bit off since the breakup," Omar said, concern knitting his brow. "Just make sure he's okay, yeah?" I nodded, masking the unease rising in my chest. I didn't have the words for it yet, but I sensed a shift. Something about to unfold. Something I wasn't sure I was ready for. As Omar packed his suitcase that night, I stood in the doorway watching him, wondering how we got here. So distant, so distracted. I told myself everything was fine. In the wake of Omar's departure, the house grew quiet yet strangely charged, as if each corner held a secret waiting to be revealed. Tariq's presence, once merely a benign family guest, began to take on a more intricate hue with each passing day. Initially, his visits were sporadic and unassuming, but soon he arrived each morning with a gentle knock and a warm, lingering smile that seemed to say he cared more than he should. I found myself both comforted and unnerved by the subtle intensity in his gaze, a silent invitation to a conversation deeper than small talk. At first, I rationalized his extra attention as nothing more than kindness. He helped with minor repairs, prepared a fresh pot of coffee, and even shared stories that brightened the long hours of solitude. His laughter filled the empty rooms, momentarily dispelling the loneliness that had crept into my life. Yet beneath that congenial exterior, there was an undercurrent of something unspoken. Every compliment he offered and every lingering glance slowly eroded the boundaries I had carefully maintained. One dreary afternoon, when rain drummed softly on our windows, Tariq and I found ourselves alone in the living room. The soft light cast shadows that danced around us as he spoke with an earnestness that left little room for pretense. "You deserve to be cherished," he said quietly, his tone gentle yet charged with emotion. His words struck me like a spark in the darkness, a moment of warmth that both comforted and alarmed me. I felt a rush of validation, a reminder that I was seen and valued, even if only for a fleeting instant. In the days that followed, our interactions grew more intimate. A light touch on my arm as he passed by, a shared smile over an inside joke, and a look that lingered long after our conversation had ended. All these small gestures accumulated into an emotional closeness that I had not anticipated. Each encounter left me in a state of inner conflict. Excitement battled with guilt, as I tried to convince myself that these moments were merely harmless escapes from a monotonous reality. Yet, the intensity of my response betrayed me, hinting at a vulnerability I had long concealed. By the time the week had unfolded, it became painfully clear that nothing would ever be the same. The once innocuous exchanges had transformed into an undercurrent of desire and confusion. I stood at a precipice, torn between the security of a familiar life and the dangerous allure of uncharted emotions. As I watched the rain streak down the window, I knew that the path ahead would force me to confront the deepest parts of my heart. A confrontation that promised to redefine everything I once held dear. Morning came, but the sun didn't feel warm. It cast long shadows across the room, sharp and uninviting as if reflecting the unease gnawing at my chest. I lay still for a moment, eyes fixed on the ceiling, replaying the night sounds, the footsteps, the laughter, the silence that followed. None of it made sense, but all of it felt wrong. Zara was already up, humming in the kitchen as if the world hadn't shifted overnight. I followed the sound, trying to read her movements, her voice, anything. She smiled when she saw me, casual, effortless. "I made your coffee," she said, sliding the cup toward me. Her eyes met mine for a split second before darting away. "Did you have someone over last night?" I asked, forcing the question out with a calmness I didn't feel. She paused, just for a heartbeat, then laughed. "No, just me. Maybe you were dreaming." Dreaming? The word echoed. My grip tightened around the cup, the ceramic suddenly cold against my skin. I let it go for the moment. But I couldn't shake it. Something wasn't right. After she left for work, I began to search, not out of paranoia, but because I needed clarity. I checked the front door camera. Zara always insisted on keeping it on for safety. I'd rarely needed to review it. I fast-forwarded through the footage from the night before, my fingers trembling. Nothing for hours. Then, 1:02 a.m., the camera flickered to life. A figure at the door. Ryan. My chest tightened. He looked around before Zara opened the door, pulling him inside quickly, almost nervously. No words were exchanged, at least not outside. The door shut behind them, and the video ended. I sat frozen, the breath knocked out of me. Ryan. My best friend. The one I trusted with everything. The betrayal wasn't just imagined. It was real. Concrete. Inescapable. Still, I needed more. I opened Zara's laptop, hesitating only briefly before navigating to her messages. I wasn't proud, but I couldn't stop. There they were. Messages between her and Ryan, cryptic, careful, but undeniably intimate. Plans. Inside jokes. Mentions of last night, and keeping it quiet. The kind of messages that only confirmed what I'd feared. I closed the laptop, nausea rising in my throat. It wasn't just a mistake. It was a choice by both of them. I stared out the window, the world outside continuing as if nothing had changed. But for me, everything had. My foundation had crumbled, and all that was left was betrayal. Still, I wasn't going to confront them in anger. I wasn't going to scream or break things. I would confront them with the truth and the evidence they couldn't deny, because now I knew. Evening settled in slowly, casting golden light through the blinds, but I felt nothing of its beauty. The house was silent, the kind of silence that waits patient, tense. I sat in the living room, the laptop open before me, the door camera footage paused at the frame of Ryan stepping inside. My mind was still, my emotions dulled by hours of reflection. I wasn't confused anymore. I wasn't hurt. I was ready. Zara walked in at 6, her heels clicking across the floor. She greeted me with her usual brightness, setting her bag down and stretching. "You're home early," she said. "I needed to talk," I replied, my tone even. Controlled, her eyes flicked to the laptop, then back to me. "Is everything okay?" "Depends," I said. "Why don't you sit?" A flicker of unease crossed her face, but she sat across from me. I hit play. The video ran for 10 seconds, Ryan at the door, her pulling him inside, both of them disappearing into the house. No words. Just action. Silence filled the room. Her expression cracked, eyes wide, lips parted. "I can explain," I raised a hand. "Don't. I already know everything. The messages, the late-night meetings, the lies." Her face crumpled, guilt washing over her features like a tidal wave. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this," she whispered. "But it did," I replied. "You chose this. Both of you." Tears welled in her eyes, but I didn't move. The weight of betrayal had already settled, and there was no room for sympathy. My phone buzzed. "Ryan." I answered. "You might want to come over," I said flatly. "We need to talk." 20 minutes later, he arrived. Nervous. Unsure. When he stepped into the room and saw us both there, his face paled. I didn't waste words. I hit play again. Let him watch himself walk into my home in the dead of night. "You were like a brother to me," I said, voice steady, cold. "And you threw that away for what?" He stumbled over excuses, apologies, but none of it mattered. "The trust was gone, the damage done. I'm not here for apologies," I said. "I just want you both to know I'm done. With this. With you." Zara reached out, desperate. "Please, we can fix this." "No," I said, standing. "You broke it. Now live with it." I walked out, the door closing behind me with finality. The air outside was crisp, clean, a stark contrast to the suffocating betrayal inside. I didn't look back.